Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Diverse Goddess. It's Hannah, and in today's video I'm going to go over 10 misunderstandings and truths about spirituality, so keep watching. So I wanted to make this video today because I do feel there's a lot of misunderstandings out there today around what being spiritual is. And I do consider myself spiritual, but I consider myself more than just spiritual too, because I also believe in nature. So I also consider myself into naturism. And I also follow my own path and my own voice, which I call Hannah-ism. But either way, whatever you want to call it, it all falls under the umbrella of spirituality. So what are some of the misunderstandings of spirituality? Well, misunderstanding number one is that people assume that spirituality looks a certain way, or you as a person has to look a certain way. And what is that look? It's usually the look of a guru, or that you have to wear robes and sandals. And it's usually like, oh, I wear yoga pants and I drink green juice. It's almost become a certain trend, and sometimes that trend or that look of spirituality becomes almost a uniform to be like, look, I'm a spiritual person because I'm wearing the uniform. Now, I'm not saying that if you want to wear certain clothes that make you feel more connected to your spirituality, and I call it a uniform because it's almost become to a certain point where it has become a uniform, where it's like, if I wear certain clothes, then I'm considered more spiritual. If I wear other clothes, then I'm not considered spiritual. But that's not true. You can look like a rapper and be spiritual. You can dress like a fashion model and be spiritual. There is no one look to spirituality, because the truth is spirituality comes in many different forms and looks. As many variety as there are trees and fruits and vegetables and animals, and even the variety of shapes and sizes and looks that people come in. If you want to know what spirituality looks like, look into nature, look at the animals, look at yourself in the mirror, look at your neighbor, look at the person down the road. That's what spirituality can look like. It does not take one form, or there is not one look to spirituality. Misunderstanding number two about spirituality is that people seem to think that spirituality is only about love, light, and compassion, and nothing negative or bad. But the truth is, real spirituality is about evolving and about growth, so we can get to a space of feeling more loving and more compassionate, so we can become whole and we can understand and take power of our own light and shine it everywhere like the sun. However, what does the sun do? What does the light do when it shines on everything? That includes the darker places in life. That includes the darker feelings of life. It includes everything. So spirituality is not about, oh, let's just all be love and light and airy-fairy and let's just ignore all the negative. When that happens, you create an imbalance. And spirituality is about balance, about bringing both forces together, the good and the bad, the light and the dark, the negative and the positive. In order to be whole, you also have to shine the light on the darker parts of humanity and of life and ourselves. And why is that? Because take mold, for example, in a refrigerator. If you have mold in a refrigerator, if you just throw a towel over it and you're just like, oh, well, just focus on all the positive and don't worry about the mold, don't even talk about it, don't look at it, don't even shine your light there, just cover it up because it's so negative, we don't want to look at it. What happens to mold when you ignore it? It flourishes, it grows, and eventually the mold will start to grow so much where you have to look at it. You will have to see it, and you will have to do something about it to clean it up. The whole point about being more conscious and more aware, especially of the darker parts of humanity and in life and ourselves, is so we can bring awareness to it, so we can evolve past it. But we can't evolve past it unless we look at it. So spirituality is about shining light onto all things, good or bad, positive or negative. But really, you shouldn't judge something good or bad, because it really isn't good or bad. It's just something is either evolved or it's not. The whole point of evolving and being spiritual is so we can evolve past the negatives and the darker parts of life. But the only way we can evolve past it is if we understand it and look at it and admit that it's there. Ignoring it is not going to make it go away. Just like that mold in the refrigerator. You can ignore it all you want, but guess what? It's still there. It's still going to flourish. And it's going to be there until you clean it up, until you become aware that it's there. So that is the whole point. And spirituality is not about judging something as good or bad. It's about awareness and growth. Misunderstanding number 3 about spirituality is that people assume that it's all about enlightenment, and that enlightenment is an end goal. And the truth is that yes, we want to strive to be more awake, we want to strive to be more enlightened and more aware and conscious, but the real truth is that there is no end goal, because no matter how much you evolve as a person, there is always more to know. There is always more to understand. There is always more room to grow, always. So there is no end goal, because our potential to expand and to evolve is infinite. Misunderstanding number 4 about spirituality is that people assume that all spirituality is fake. And the truth is, spirituality can't be fake, because whether you believe in it or not, or it's something that you practice or are aware of, we are all spirit beings. Everything in life has a life force energy, whether it be in animals, plants, ourselves as human. Everything has a spirit, hence spirituality. It's about seeing the spirit in life. So spirituality exists whether you believe it or not, or think it's fake or something people have made up, but it is a very real thing. And sometimes I think people think that spirituality is fake because maybe they've come across fake readers or fake teachers or fake gurus. And yes, there are quote unquote fakes out there who claim to be one thing but are something else, or they claim to be spiritual because they wear the mask of spirituality, they wear the uniform, the clothes, they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. Because behind closed doors, they're a complete mess, or they haven't really done that much spiritual work on themselves. And so, yes, there are people like that out there, but it's not to be judged, because even that is a form of spiritual path, because it's about fear. And they wear this mask because they're actually afraid to do the spiritual work, but they want to, so it's a wanting of it, but they can't actually find it in themselves yet, and so they project or wear a mask of what they wish they could be. But again, it's not to be judged, but it's still a spiritual path. But because people have come across these type of people, they assume everyone is fake, and it's not true. There are genuinely spiritual people out there that do know what they're talking about and do the work, do talk the talk and walk the walk. And those that are wearing a spiritual mask, it's like I said, it's not to be judged whether or not it's good or bad. That just happens to be where those people are on their spiritual journey. And maybe one day they'll take the mask off and actually do the real work, because in truth, we can only be responsible for our own growth. But spirituality is not fake by any means. A misunderstanding number 5 about spirituality is that I think people assume that if you're spiritual, that you're better than other people. And when people assume that they're better than other people, it's what I like to call the spiritual ego. And I do see a lot of spiritual ego out there. And like I mentioned, the people who wear a spiritual mask, that's exactly what it is, because they wear that mask to protect them so they don't have to take criticism, or they feel that it exempts them from having to take criticism or feedback, or really having to do spiritual growth, which can be painful. And so it's a form of protection. Again, ego is about protection, but spirituality is not about being better than other people. Like I've said, it's about growth and evolution, and everybody is at a different stage of evolution. And you can think of it the same way as if you start a garden. If you start a garden early and things sprout sooner, and then you plant things, say 3 or 4 years later, guess what? Those things are going to sprout later. But does that mean that whatever you planted first is better? No, it's just at a different developmental stage. And that's exactly where everybody is. Everybody is just at a different stage. But a lot of people want to take spirituality, and depending on what stage they're at, as a form to say that I'm better than somebody else. Oh, I'm more evolved than you are, or I'm better than this person, or I understand this more than you do, I'm more woke than you are. They use it as a spiritual ego. Furthermore, we are all unique expressions of life. We all are very individualized. So we all have different gifts, different lessons, things that we're supposed to learn. So we're all going to be all over the map. And every place that somebody is exactly where they need to be. So it's not better or worse than where you're supposed to be. So in short, if you think being spiritual makes you better than other people, you're mistaken. Misunderstanding number 6 that people have, which is similar to that people think that spirituality is about enlightenment or an end goal. This misunderstanding is about that people think if you're spiritual or being spiritual is about knowing everything. And spirituality or being spiritual does not mean you know everything, because like I've already said before, just like there's an infinite amount that we can grow as a person, there is no limit to how much we can grow and expand and evolve. The same thing with our knowing. Because the more you know, or the more answers you find newer questions always arise. So whenever there's questions and then there's answers, there's always going to be new questions. Always. No matter what stage of spirituality you are at, no matter how evolved you become, there's always more that we can know. And again, that knowingness is also infinite. So being spiritual does not mean that you know everything. Misunderstanding number 7 on spirituality is that some people think that spirituality means that you're not rooted in reality, that everything is esoteric. And the truth is that spirituality is not about being devoid of reality. If anything, it's about being more rooted in reality because you want to see everything. It's to become aware of as much as possible and to learn and to grow. And spirituality just means that it's to be rooted in reality, but that there's also more to reality than meets the eye. And no, spirituality is not all about being esoteric, because most things that are spiritual, there's always a way to bring it down to a more down-to-earth plane so people can understand it more logically. Misunderstanding number 8 that people have about spirituality is that they feel if you are spiritual or you've reached a certain level of evolution that all pain is eradicated and that you're always happy and there are never any issues. But the truth, and I would say yes, the more evolved you become, the more conscious you become, the more awake you become, there are less issues because you're acting and seeing and being from a more conscious place, so your decisions are going to be different. However, that does not mean that all pain is eradicated or that all issues are eradicated. And to say that someone will always be happy if they're more evolved, yes, you do find more peace and contentment. However, that does not mean that you're always happy, because even somebody who, say, laughs a lot, behind that laughter there's always sadness. And behind everybody who's sad, there's always somebody who wants to laugh. And so the line is so thin between happiness and sadness. And the more evolved you become, the more you see. And the more you see a lot of the darker things in life. You see a lot of the pain in life. And because everything is connected, even if you have come to a more evolved place, you see all the pain in humanity. You see all the pain in life. So it's almost impossible to always be in a state of happiness. And even someone like Buddha, who was always seen as happy, and he was chubby, and he had these chubby, happy cheeks, and he was always laughing, there was also deep sadness in a Buddha, because you can't have one without the other. In order to be happy, you have to have known what sadness is. And they're both existing at the same time. It's just that it's in balance, and that's what contentment is. So to say that we want to eradicate all pain and all unhappiness and that we'll never have any issues, again, it's the same thing with thinking that growth has an end point. There's never an end point. And so don't think that people who are quote unquote spiritual, that they never feel anything but happy because they feel everything. Misunderstanding number 9 that people have about spirituality is that they feel spirituality is all about the non-physical and has nothing to do with the physical world or the material world. But the truth is, being spiritual is about bridging both together, the physical and the non-physical, because that is who we are in essence. We are a spirit or a soul, which is the non-physical, but we also have a body, which is the physical. And we chose to come in as spirits or souls in a human body so we could experience the world in a physical way. And one of the whole points about coming is as a spirit having a human experience is so we could come in as a non-physical being to experience the physical world. If you go swimming, if you go running, if you do a sport, if you cook, you're always using your body to experience things. So to say that spirituality is only about the non-physical and anybody who desires for success or wealth or material things in life can't be spiritual is inaccurate, because there's a lot of spiritual people that can do a lot of good with a lot of material wealth. It just so happens that there's a lot of people in the world that happen to have a lot of material wealth and they're not necessarily doing good things with it. But that has to do with the person. That doesn't have to do with the fact that the physical or the material world is bad. And being spiritual is about finding balance. So you have to find balance between the physical and the non-physical. And there's some people who say they're so spiritual that they're never rooted in reality or in the ground. It's a form of escapism, but that's a different topic. But you have to be grounded in both. You have to be grounded in the physical body as well as your spiritual self, and infuse both worlds together to be balanced and to be whole. And those who are rejecting the spiritual world or the spiritual side of life and are so immersed in the material world, like say maybe they're greedy or they indulge in drugs and alcohol or they indulge in too much sex, that's being too indulgent in the physical. So again, it's a form of imbalance. So you want to bridge both together in balance. And the last but not least, the 10th misunderstanding that people have on spirituality is that wisdom is about age. And anybody who saw my Auras, Indigo, and Wisdom video know that I talked about that being spiritual is not dependent on age. And if you haven't seen it, you should go check it out. But to sum it up, basically, wisdom does not always come with age. There are wise people who are young, there are old people who are young, because we come in connected when we are born, and the older you get, you have the potential to become disconnected. And when people, as they grow older and they get so-called wisdom, they just return back to their original point as a child, and we call that wisdom. But there are wise people who are young and there are old people who are young. So wisdom has no age, because all wisdom comes from within, and everybody has wisdom within them. It's a matter of whether or not you tap into it, whether or not you're aware of it, whether or not you're conscious of it, or whether or not you can articulate it. Sometimes young people can't always articulate what they understand and know, but that doesn't mean they're less wise. So the truth is that no, wisdom is not dependent on age. So on that note, I'm going to wrap up today's video, and I hope this video was helpful in understanding more on spirituality so we can see it in a more well-rounded way and not see it in a one-dimensional form. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. And if you want to stay more connected with me, you can always find me on Instagram at Hannah Rokes. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!